Hello, cooking enthusiasts. This week's video is just going to be a little fun rendition I have on beef tartare. I believe last summer I did another beef tartare video, and that was also experimental using dry-aged brisket. But this time we are just using some fresh beef heart, which is one of my favorite pieces of beef in general, and might be my top choice for tartar. Now, this footage is a few weeks old at this point, so you might notice that the bottom left corner of the camera is still smudged. As part of the little experiment, we brushed it very lightly with some high quality oyster sauce. It then went in the fridge for roughly an hour, I believe, to dry out the surface slightly, followed by just a few minutes in the actual freezer. And this is kind of the twist. We are flash frying these chunks of beef heart, and this is building on other concepts I have tried before, and maybe I've seen somewhere, but I actually don't believe I have, where I've done this with other beef and even lamb once, of giving pieces a very hard sear, or in this case, frying very hard. So the exterior is browned, but the inside is still completely raw. My hope was for the oyster sauce to increase in the caramelization, and the thorough chilling was good because it was double fried. Afterward, one more brush of the oyster sauce. Now, all of this did contribute some flavor, but not as much as I was necessarily hoping. Next is the tempura batter, which might seem confusing, but what you don't see is that we ended up frying a bunch of other tempura as well, and the tartar was more of a late addition to the overall meal. And in this instance, we are just using a pre-made tempura flour mix with water, ice, and I believe a little bit of vodka. And in this case, we are using some of that batter to make extra little crispy bits. And these are going to be a garnish for texture with the tempura. Whenever I make tartar, I always try to include a little bit of extra texture with certain components. And for a slightly deeper flavor, we also double fried these little crispies. Next, we are slicing up the beef even further, and beef heart has a unique, dense texture, so we are essentially doing a fine dice for this chopping. Depending on other cuts of beef you might use for tartare, you could go even chunkier, or with other slightly tough cuts, you could almost do closer to a rough ground beef. We are, of course, also going experimental with the flavorings. keeping it simple with a little bit of good olive oil to dress, followed by finger limes. If you haven't experienced finger limes before, they are a citrus fruit, but texture of the actual little citrus capsules is more like a small fish egg. They are really excellent for tartar because they add acidity, but they are contained until you actually bite down on them, and this also adds a pleasant texture. To continue with the more Japanese and Asian flavor profile, just a little bit of freshly grated ginger and some white pepper. In the home stretch now, we get the tartar in its initial plating with a ring mold, of course, and then comes the real Jimmy Neutron brain blast, which was to serve the tartar with white bread fried in tempura batter. Earlier in the day, my plan was to serve this with a new flavor of Chinese potato chip that we found, but the flavor didn't really work. And then I wanted to try sections of leeks fried with the tempura batter, but they didn't hold up. Then I had the idea to try just plain white bread that I had as a backup in the freezer, and the results were really nice. Just a relatively quick dip so the tempura batter doesn't soak into the interior, and you get a really crispy exterior, while the inside is just fluffy, soft, warm bread. Again, a little over the top, but very fun if you are doing tempura already. Otherwise, I really like classic fried or toasted bread. I have even served tartar with a small pizza, which is really delicious. Finally, we garnish with a really nice, high quality egg yolk. Garnish generously with some Chinese chives, a little more white pepper, also some black pepper, extra finger limes, and last but not least, our little tempura crispies. Overall, this was a really fun and delicious concept. I think I was a little too shy with some of the flavors. It could have used even more ginger and more finger limes. Also, potentially just a touch of the oyster sauce directly in the sort of dressing of the tartar, because that flavor didn't really come through on the exterior. In terms of frying the chunks of beef, again, that maybe could have gone even further, and maybe with a slightly different piece of beef. But again, overall, pretty happy, and hopefully this inspires you to try something similar. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. Otherwise, thank you for watching.